Do you sometimes want to hear from someone who will inspire you to go out and do something great? Today, I premiere a recurring series I'll be running called Everyday People, Extraordinary Leaders, and I welcome Olivia Klaus as my first guest. This is Coaching for Leaders, episode number 103.
Produced by Innovate Learning, maximizing human potential.
Greetings from Orange County, California. This is Coaching for Leaders, and I'm your host, Dave Stachowiak. This is a weekly coaching show to help people be better leaders through improved communications, human relations, and personal productivity. And I'm so glad that you tuned in for today's episode. If it's the first time you're checking out Coaching for Leaders, welcome. It's great to have you because I am beginning a new series called Everyday People, Extraordinary Leaders. And for those of you who've been listening for a while, welcome back. This new series is going to feature folks who have done extraordinary things with their leadership, but like you and me are everyday people who have just done something great, have really had the courage to take things that they've learned to be more effective at influencing others and gone out in the world and done something great with it. And I'm hoping in the future that I'll be able to feature some folks who are part of this community who will go out and do some great things. And, you know, as this show enters its second 100 episodes, one of the things I've been thinking a lot about is really taking the next step of not just us all learning more, but now what can we do to go out in the world and apply it? And so I'm really hopeful that this new series will give you some great examples of people who have gone out and done some wonderful things in the world. And I can't think of a better person to be able to feature for this very first interview than Olivia Klaus. Olivia is the director and producer of the documentary film Sin by Silence. And this started off as a very, very tiny project, one person's idea, hers, and moved to be a movement, moved into be a movement, affecting so many people's lives, touching so many people, me included, and ended up changing the laws of the state of California. An incredible story, and I'm going to let the story speak for itself. So in a moment here, I'll introduce Olivia, let her tell you the story of Sin by Silence. Before I do, at the end of the episode here, I've got a call to action, something you can do if you want to help out in this project as well. That is ongoing. Also, a few announcements of things that I've mentioned the last couple of weeks, a few reminders. So stick around for the end. But first, here's my interview with Olivia Klaus. Well, I'm thrilled to welcome today my guest, Olivia Klaus. Olivia is a documentary filmmaker, and her production company is Quiet Little Place. And she is the director and producer of the film Sin by Silence, her most recent film. And Bonnie and I first saw this film, I guess it was probably 4 or 5 years ago, and we had the privilege to see it at an early screening. And this film was and is the most powerful film I've ever seen. And that goes with all of the feature films, any film I've seen in my entire life. It is such a powerful story about Convicted Women Against Abuse, which is an organization that a group of women inside prison formed to break the silence about abuse and learn more about what they needed to do to help others to stop the cycle of violence and domestic violence. And so I'm so thrilled to be able to welcome Olivia to the show today. Olivia, welcome to Coaching for Leaders.
Thanks so much for having me, and thanks so much for the huge compliment about the film. That's great to know.
I love this film, which is, it's sort of an odd thing to say because, of course, it's such about a very difficult subject.
Right, yeah.
And I can't even be in the, like my emotional response when I saw this film, but Bonnie and I, both of us, I mean, we were just struck by the power of this film. And so I really am impressed with what you have created with this and the story you've told. And so before we get into some of the details, I was wondering if maybe you could just, for the benefit of our listening audience, just give a little overview of what this film is and how you gained an interest in the issue of looking at domestic violence.
Yeah, Sin by Silence is the story, like you said, of the battered women's support group, Convicted Women Against Abuse. It actually is an incredible group of women who society has labeled as killers, and really they are survivors. They are women who, in a split second, had to choose to defend their lives, the lives of their children, against their abusive partners, and unfortunately have been in prison because of that act for the past 25, 30 years. And, the film really dives into really what, makes abusive relationships tick and what these women went through, because really I saw these women as the experts on the issue. I mean, 4 women die a day due to abusive relationships, and these women beat the odds. I mean, unfortunately, it was at the death of their abuser, but they came out and still have a voice to kind of teach society and teach all of us what they learned and what we can learn from their mistakes to hopefully help prevent it from happening again. And so we really dive into this group, these incredible survivors, the laws that they help change, and how things are different today for women who commit the same types of crimes. And, really just to, rewind even before that, the film, I started volunteering at the California Institution for Women, where we documented this group back in 2001, is when I started volunteering. And it was because of one of my best friends had finally opened up about the abuse she was enduring in her marriage. And I thought she had a great marriage. She had been married for almost 10 years. They had 2 beautiful children. And, you know about domestic violence, but it's always something that happens to other people. I never imagined that it would happen in my circle of friends.
Yeah.
And, once my best friend opened up to me, it completely opened my eyes to this other side of the world, like this other side of life that I ignored. And, once it happens, in whether it's in your own life or in someone that you love's life, like, you completely have this complete flip of your life to really understand, okay, why does she keep going back? What about the kids? How does she, why doesn't she just leave? I used to be under the impression of all those same questions where it was a black and white issue. And really, once this happened to my friend and I started on this quest to find the answers, it was actually a colleague of mine, Dr. Elizabeth Leonard, who wrote the book Convicted Survivors. She took me to prison with her. And she said, if you're going to help your friend, then you've got to come to prison and learn from the experts. And so I went to prison and started volunteering with her. And from that first day I met these women, they completely changed my life. What society has labeled as killers, and women who have been in prison for 25 plus years, they were my grandmas in that group that first night that I went there. They were my mothers. They were my sister. They were myself. I just saw so much in these women, and so much hurt and so much hope at the same time. And so really that's where it all began when I started on this quest, was really just to help a friend who finally had opened up to me about what she was enduring behind closed doors.
And I should mention the movie does really a brilliant job of addressing a lot of the questions you've just posed here in the introduction. And, it's interesting. A lot of the women who are featured in this movie were incarcerated long before many of the laws changed and are the way they are today, where so many more things are considered by juries and judges in issues of domestic violence like this. So I'm curious, how did this go from you going in and volunteering to turning into a documentary? Where was the transition point?
Yeah, I mean, I've worked in production my entire career, from LA to New York to different shows to different films. And, I was more on the studio side of things. And, when I started volunteering with this group, and over, a couple years, I was continuing to volunteer and building relationship with these women and, learning more about each other. And they learned more about my background and what I did for a living and what my life was like. And I remember it was one night, one of the women got up before group started and, was like, Olivia, we have a question for you. And I was like, okay, how can I help, type thing. And they said, well, we know that you work in film and we want you to do a film on us. We want you to tell our stories.
Amazing.
And it completely took me back. I mean, I knew from when I started going to this group that They have incredible stories. They're incredible women. Like, of course, this is a great story that should be told. But that was honestly not my priority for being there. My priority was to help my friend and learn from these women stuff that I couldn't learn from books that I was reading, and it was working. My friend was opening up to me and really confiding in me. And I really attributed that to these women. And so I wasn't taking the producer role when I was going to this group and being like, oh, I'm going to, capture these stories and tell these women's stories to the world. It was actually the inmates who proposed this project to me. And, once they asked me, how could I say no? I saw how they were helping me help my friends. So how could I not tell their stories to the world and help even more women and even more families with what they're enduring? So it happened. The process of the film happened a very different way than probably a lot of people assume, knowing that my background's in film. But, I remember that night they, asked me to do the film. And of course, right there on the spot, I said no. I said yes, sorry. But in my head, I'm saying no, like, how are you going to pull this off, Olivia? You work in LA in studio work and on major films. Like, how are you going to pull off a documentary?
Yeah.
And these women gave me the first $1,000 donation to start the project.
Oh,
and
wow.
These women, they make 10 cents an hour at their jobs in the prison. And they gathered $1,000 and they gave it to me and said, we want you to tell our stories and we want to help you do it. And so it kind of became this partnership where I was like, wow, if they just gave me $1,000, like maybe there is a way to make this happen, where looking for more donations. And, I really felt like I couldn't let them down. And so it was really interesting how it all came to fruition.
That's amazing. I didn't know that part of the story. What an incredible act for them to assemble that much money in prison. Wow.
Yeah.
So as you went along and the movie started to come together, what did you want to see happen because of this movie?
I remember sitting in the editing room. It was a long process to get this film going. It was, really long to, get people to really buy into the film, buy into the story, buy into the stories that we were trying to tell and what we were trying to do. And really, it was in the editing room after we had shot a bunch of these stories and a lot of these interviews, and I had raised the funds, and we had come to the editing room and we're piecing it together. And I was editing with Ann Carn Cleveland, was my editor and producer, and did an amazing job. And she asked me one day, she's like, well, what do you want to do with this film? What do you want to see happen? And I said, first of all, I want to get these women out of prison. And so, we kind of, in filmmaking, you kind of take okay, what's the end result? And you work backwards from there, and you kind of like create the journey and the story, basically, even for your film and its campaign, all getting to that one major goal. And so really everything that we crafted revolved around that one focus that we wanted to see happen. Of course, we wanted to do, be successful with the film and, win festival awards and get a lot of press and, get broadcasted. And of course, there's all those things. But really, my goal was to get these women out of prison because, and of course, laws have changed and things are better if women commit these crimes. But these women have spent 25 plus years and they'd been forgotten about in the system. They had been it was such an injustice why they were still in prison. And, we just knew we had to do something, and we knew we could inspire that change through the film. So really, that's how the process works for us. We kind of made our goal and then work backwards for how are we going to get to that goal. And so that's really the journey of how this all came about, of setting up our goals and really trying to acquire those goals and achieve them. To really be like, okay, well, what's going to get me to this step and what's going to get me to that step and how am I going to connect these dots, and just kind of trying to create that web of connecting the dots.
Well, this alludes perfectly to my next question, which is you alluded to the fact that this was a long process. And how long was it from when you first were asked to do this to the film actually screening? Was it months, years?
It was years, definitely. It was about 2 years of fundraising and initial filming with like pre-interviews with a lot of the women and inmates there in prison to kind of see who did we want to focus on, what were the stories we wanted to tell, what were the the court cases that we could actually get access to their court files, what were the experts that we wanted to interview, could we find one of the jurors, could we find some of the lawyers. I mean, there's a lot of process to go into. It's a lot harder with documentaries because you don't have a script. Like your script basically comes together in the editing room. And so you really just have to cast your net out far and, not only with the story, but also with funding to really see what comes in. And so it was about 2 years probably of all that research, all that background, all those pre-interviews, and also all the fundraising too. I mean, that was the hardest part of this project, was just getting people to believe in this story. And that's the hardest part because I couldn't have people accessible. The women that we were profiling and the stories we were telling aren't accessible to society.
Yeah.
You have to go through a process of, even getting approved to become a volunteer in the prison. And so really it was hard for me to get investors or even funders interested with something so inaccessible and something so, when you look at these women's stories on paper, I mean, they are guilty. They did kill someone. And domestic violence definitely is a lot more talked about now. But even when I was fundraising and doing all of this, back in the mid 2000s, it still was a topic that still was, on pins and needles. And especially for, these women are different types of victims. They are not the victims in the shelter. They are not your typical victims, calling 911 and trying to get help. They used to be. But they aren't anymore. And so it was hard to get a lot of people interested in the other type of domestic violence victim, women who were victims behind bars. And so it was a long process of really like 2 to 3 years of research. We filmed for about 5 years, actually, filmed and edited the story. It took about 5 years because of how it was so hard to get into prison, because of the prison schedule for us to film, because once we wanted a happy ending to our story, and we had edited the film and were ready to start going for festivals. And one of the inmates that we were following in the film finally had a chance to get out and be released after 26 years in prison. So we went back and filmed more to totally rework the ending of the film to have that complete, bow on top of the film where actually one of the women is released at the end. Sorry to give the ending away, but there is hopeful.
Yeah.
A hopeful ending to the film. And, that process was really long and it was really hard. And you just have to kind of roll with what was happening to kind of make it complete. So it was a long process. I mean, from 2001 is when I started going to prison, and 2009, we finally debuted the film. So it was a long journey.
So what I'm curious about is how did you stay productive during this project? Because you must have had situations where you just like, this will never happen along that period, or it'll never come together in all the pieces it needs to. How did you keep yourself productive, Olivia?
It was tough. I mean, it really was. It was like battle after battle, mountain after mountain that I had to climb. And really it came down to the conviction of my heart. And, that's especially in the field of documentary filmmaking and in the field of advocacy, like you do something not for the money. You don't do it for the exposure. You do it because it's the right thing to do. And really that's what kept me going, and really seeing the potential in my friend. And this all started with that one phone call from my friend, and I was seeing how she was blossoming, and I was seeing how she was becoming empowered just from how I was able to better communicate with her because of what I had learned from these women. And so, seeing all these things happening, people may not have bought into my idea. They didn't want to fund it. The foundations didn't want to give me any grants, but I saw it differently. And I knew that this was something that I had to do. And so regardless if, I had to dip into my savings to pay for the film, I had to, beg, borrow, and, I didn't steal, but, the same type of thing, it became very close to all of this stuff that I gave up in my life just to make sure that I could make this happen. And that's a, kind of a blessing in disguise that I had to go through all of that to kind of come out the end knowing that this could happen. Like, I've gone through all this journey and I've gone through these mountains and these valleys for a reason. And it is to create this film that, once I had the film together, it was so much easier to get people on board. It was so much easier to, get the foundations to help fund, to get, broadcasters interested, to get the press interested, because we finally had these great women and they were accessible to people finally, but it was really hard to stay productive. And it really just came down to, I knew I was doing the right thing.
Mm. One of the things I hear a lot from leaders who are doing really important work and really difficult work is that while there's many, many obstacles externally, and you've faced tons in this project, that there are also a lot of internal obstacles that leaders get in their own way a lot, even more so. Yes. I'm wondering how you got in your own way during this, and what did you do to work through that?
I think I was my own worst enemy in this project.
How so?
I think it's something that a lot of people forget about. And I'm sure, in my field and everyone's field, no matter what type of leadership role they're taking on, is you forget about self-care. You forget about that you're just as important as the project that you're working on. And if you don't take care of yourself and, take those breaks and take, at least a day off, or, take nights away from your cell phone and your email, so that, you at least get some type of sanity that you can help create for yourself, so that you are more productive in the work that you're doing. So you don't get burned out on the work that you're doing. It's hard to set up those boundaries, especially when you're the one in charge, because you're responsible for everything, but it's how can you be just as healthy in those boundaries for yourself as you are in the incredible work that you're doing. And so that's something that definitely I learned on this project, and definitely like the key that, I always remind myself of is self-care. Because if I'm not taking care of myself, then whatever work I'm doing is not going to be as productive.
Yeah. And is there anything particular that you now, even years past the movie having been completed, although the project isn't complete, which we'll talk about in a minute here, but that you still do as far as self-care that's really been helpful to you?
Really, I think it is just making sure I'm not, one woman on an island, that really I have a good, solid team. Because for a lot of this last project for Sin by Silence, I was one woman on an island, having to do so much myself and having to put so many different hats on to keep the project moving forward and to get it done. And really, that's what I've learned is if you don't have a solid team in place, then, there's no one to carry you through those valleys. There's no one to help carry things through when you get to the top of the mountain and you're just about ready to go over and you don't have enough stamina in you to make it over the mountaintop. Really, I think it is creating the right team around you is so important, because they help lift you up in those times when you can't do it yourself. And really, that's what I learned the most. I mean, especially, they say in my field that a film director is only as good as the producers that he has on his team. And it's so true that you're only as good as the people that you surround yourself with. And then if you don't surround yourself with people, then you're only as good as yourself. And, we know where that goes, where you get burned out and you just hit a wall, basically. So it's really, for me, the key is teamwork, to make sure that you can continue to be, have progress in the work that you're doing.
Well, speaking of being surrounded by people, you certainly did run into a lot of different personality types and professions in this work. I mean, I think about some of the people you interacted with, the inmates, the folks in the prison system, legislatures, judges, attorneys. How did you find that you needed to adapt in order to relate and communicate with all these different kinds of people?
Yeah, it was a big learning process. I mean, it's true that all the red tape in the prisons and correction system, I had to learn on my own, and how to get approval and how to get, all the licensing and legal work done so that I could actually film in prison. and to actually, we had kind of how to adapt for the film, getting ready for it to be released. Well, what are the organizations we're going to partner with? Who's going to help us spread the word? Are they domestic violence organizations? Are they, the prison reform type organizations? There was a lot of stuff that we had to look into because I was really venturing into, whole new territory. And it's true, like we had to adapt and have different roles and put different hats on where one person, one phone call I was talking to a senator and the next phone call I'm talking to a battered women's shelter. It was really tough to get that all done and to adapt and to have the right language for, whatever organization you're speaking with, whether it be criminal justice reform or domestic violence, the anti-violence movement. It was really tough to communicate, and really just what it came down to for me still was just that conviction of my heart, and that I was doing this not for myself. I was doing this for one of my best friends, and I was doing this for women in prison who I believe should not be there any longer. And so really it came down to where I wasn't speaking for myself. I was speaking for all of these women, and I was representing a whole movement that I was trying to get going. And that's really what helped me adapt and helped, I think just relate to all, from a senator to a domestic violence shelter, on just a personal level, where this isn't about me. This isn't about us. This is about changing the world. And so really getting people on that bandwagon was tough, but you just learn to adapt on that same common theme was, well, my goal is to try to get these women out of prison. So how can I get these people along with that goal? And especially once we had the film out and people could meet these women through watching the film, it was a lot easier, that's for sure.
Yeah. What advice do you have, Olivia, for those out there who discover they've got a passion for something and they want to do something to help the world? What would you say? Where should someone start?
I think that you just gotta go for it. It's not where do you start, it's why haven't you started yet? If you see an injustice in the world, or if you see something you want to change in your business, or if you see something you want to change in your organization, it's do something about it. It's about just taking that step forward and finally saying, well, you know what, I might not be all in, but I'm going to start this journey and see where it goes. And, that's what happened for me. It's like, well, I just had to make that decision. When my friend gave me that, called me on the phone, am I in it or am I out? Am I going to help her? Am I going to turn a blind eye? And then it also came to that point where I was going to start volunteering in prison. I mean, I was nervous that first day I went to prison. I didn't know what I was doing, going to prison. And you see it in the movies and you see it in your head, like what prison's like and who am I going to meet? And these women murdered someone and, there's going to be some criminals in there. What am I doing? But it's like, no, this has a bigger purpose here. I'm going to help my friend. So I took that step into prison. And then once I was in prison, it's like, these women don't deserve to be here. So I'm going to take that next step and do something about it. And so really it's about just motivating, I hope the people listening just become motivated from, what happened, from what started as one phone call for me, and we can get in this now, turn into a film that has been broadcasted to millions of people, has helped change laws. I mean, really, if I hadn't taken that first step, look what wouldn't have happened, And so really it just comes down to, are you doing the right thing? And if you are, and if you believe you're doing the right thing, then go for it. Don't let anything stop you. And just really if the dots aren't connecting one way, well, how can you reconnect them another way?
I heard the quote a while ago that the smallest act is worth more than the grandest intention. And I think it's true for so many of us, Olivia, that we have really good intentions and we see injustices or we see things that we want to change about the world or about our businesses or about the climates we work in. And a lot of us, and I'll put myself in this category too, we like to complain about it and we say, oh, someone should do something about that. But when you get to the point of really who's going to do something about it, that becomes a much, much smaller group of people. And the people who are willing to be the doers, to take innovative action, are people that can create some amazing things in the world. And so, and you're one of them. And I want to talk more now about what's happened since this movie came out, because the movie came out and you all went on a long tour to screen the movie. And I know you talked to many organizations and universities, and you engaged many, many young people in the dialogue around this movie, which is just amazing. And that was just the beginning. Can you tell us what happened next?
Yeah, I mean, I never imagined where this film would go. And, you always have the best intention for your work and want to see it go far, but it's always a humbling experience when it does. I mean, Sin by Silence, Dave, you were there at one of our first screenings.
I was.
You were there when we were just launching and starting in festivals. And, I did, once I've said this, once I had the film, it was a lot easier to get people on board with what I was doing. And, we got funding to go on a national tour back in 2009 to take the film into communities that had the worst domestic violence statistics. And that was really my passion, was to take this film to where it was needed the most, to really open up communities' eyes to what was happening around them through these women's stories, through these worst case scenarios, to really inspire people to want to prevent this from happening again. And so I was on the road for, almost a year, between festival screenings and, community screenings. We'd stop in a town like in Indiana, and we'd make sure to hit up a university. We would make sure to hit up a fundraiser for the domestic violence shelter in that community. We would go to church. We would go to just a community-wide event. We would try to make sure and hit up every factor while we were in that city to make sure that we got the different audiences to exposed to the stories, exposed to the issues, and connected with an organization in their community that they could then help, because so many people are inspired to do something after they've seen the film. Well, I wanted to make sure that we could connect those dots for people and get them volunteering places or get them donating to their local shelter or something. I really was on this road of advocacy because my goal was to get these women out of prison. And, it kind of happened where, in 2010, we did a huge online initiative where we, created all these packages and these bundles for people to use the film in their own community, because I could only be so many places, and word was catching just wildfire. And so we created these packages online for people to download all of the resources so they could, have their own events in their own community. And it just took off even more, where people were hosting their own events across the country. And, it kind of took off. And then, a broadcaster got interested in the film and what we were doing. And so in 2011, we debuted on the Discovery Channel to over 2.5 million viewers. We're able to to connect with these women's stories and be inspired by these women's stories. And, all this press got involved, from NPR to People Magazine to, Fox News. And it was just fantastic that, something that started so little had turned into something so big. And that really comes down to, if I had given up at any of those valleys that I had hit along the point, of making this project, it wouldn't have gone to where it did to inspire, millions of people across the country and across the world. If there was a point in my journey that I didn't take that first step to do something, that this wouldn't have happened. And so what was even, more exciting was still, we still had that goal of how are we going to get these women out of prison? Like, we've inspired so many people across the world, but still these women are still in prison. And it was actually after the broadcast that I got a call from a legislator in California who was willing to help make that happen. And so in 2012, I put on my legislator hat and I became almost a lobbyist, where I had to start navigating the political world and understanding how the political process worked, and really getting to a point where we had 2 laws that we were trying to pass through the state of California to help the women who were still incarcerated. Because the women who we feature in the film, they were not allowed to submit as evidence what they went through in their past, whether it be, all of the evidence that they had of abuse, all the witnesses, that was not admissible in court. And where it is today, it's admissible in court. And so back then, all these women had witnesses, they had medical records, they had police reports. Back then, there were no laws in place that had, allowed the judge to say, okay, well, here's the crime, but really what led to this crime? There had to be something that led this woman to do what she did. And so that was really the injustice that was still allowing these women to be incarcerated, and the injustice that still kept them behind bars. And so we were able to help change that through Assemblywoman Fiona Ma out of San Francisco. She helped us put 2 laws on the books, the Sin by Silence bills, that help these women, whether it be through their parole process or whether it be to repetition the courts to get resentenced under today's laws. They are now able to submit their evidence of abuse to help explain why they did what they did. And so really that is kind of the journey that I've taken. It's been hard, it's been tough, but really hopefully it helps inspire others to just take that first step. When I got that phone call back in 2001, I never knew it'd lead to where I am today, where we have this incredible film and incredible press, and laws have changed in California that we're trying to carry on to other states. But, I'm just one person who had the conviction of my heart to help these women in prison. And, maybe that's a lot more of an advocacy role than others are willing to take on. But I'm sure that every company and every organization and every person in their role in their life has something that they just are thinking, well, this needs to change, but who's going to do it? Maybe I'm the one that needs to do it, because you never know where it'll take you.
It was so amazing just watching this from as more of an outsider to the project over the last couple of years, Olivia, and seeing the pictures you'd send over email, and that you were there with an assembly person, and then all of a sudden the next picture a couple weeks later would be a couple of assembly people, and then there was a whole bunch of senators, and then eventually we got this notification that the governor had signed the bills, and it was so exciting to see what you and the people who've been involved with you on this project and the women in prison have created as a result of this movement around this film. It's just an amazing, amazing story that you've told, and an amazing movement that you've created.
No, it's been exciting, and it's something that I never expected, but something that I am just so proud of, because really it's been tough. Many times I wanted to give up, but look at the difference that's happened. People have been inspired. Laws have changed. We just had the first woman released under the new laws just a month ago. She was released after 26 years in prison. And, there's more women that are finally able to petition the courts now. Over 7,000 domestic violence survivors in California are now being affected by this work. Wow. And are finally having hope that they can, hopefully go home someday. And so it's just inspiring and very overwhelming. And I'll probably never know the extent that the impact of this film and the work has done. But, I get emails every once in a while of just a woman who has, decided to volunteer for her local shelter, or has decided to finally leave her abusive husband because she saw these women's stories, and, she saw herself in these women, and she knew that it was finally time for her to get out. That's the kind of stuff that makes a difference. And that's the kind of stuff that keeps me going. It's hard to think that, me and now my small team have been able to impact all of this stuff, and all these changes and all making this difference. But if I hadn't done that, look what wouldn't have happened. Glenda Virgil, who was released just a month ago after 26 years in prison, she'd still be in prison. Mm-hmm. And it's just stuff like that keeps you going and keeps you knowing, okay, I knew this was the right thing to do when no one else would believe in me. And now finally they're seeing it definitely was the right thing to do.
So I know that people listening are going to want to get their hands on seeing the movie as soon as they hear this interview. And so I'm going to embed the trailer for the movie onto the show notes. So definitely check those out on our website. But Olivia, tell us, what's the best way to get a hold of a copy of the movie, and what do you suggest?
Yeah, the best way is to go to sinbysilence.com. We can also find us on Facebook. You can just search for Sin by Silence. We're also on Twitter. And, there's just so many ways we've definitely crossed over. But just sinbysilence.com, you can definitely get to know the women, see all the stuff that we have available for the different packaging and what we've done with the film and the exposure that we've got. And we just love for people to connect with us and, join the movement to hopefully it can inspire them in whatever they're doing and the work that they're doing to kind of, keep going on the road that they're going on.
One of the things you've mentioned that's really struck me, Olivia, is just how much harder it is to get people to buy into a vision before it has really emerged into something. And just to back up what you've said, Bonnie had heard about your project earlier than I did. And the first time I heard about it is when we went to the screening. I think it was one of your first screenings. And at the end of watching this movie, I mean, both of us were in tears. I mean, just bawling. And so this amazing masterpiece of a movie we had just seen, and we were sitting there like, how much money do they need? Where's the checkbook? It's one of those things where like, and so as powerful as that is, I think in some ways it's easier at that point to get involved, like you said. Yes. What I think is really amazing to me is the people who were involved with you and you on the front end before anything was ever created. Because, of course, everything's created twice, once in our minds as a vision and then once in reality.
Right.
And blessed are you who were able to have the vision for this and to fight through the years you went through this to take your vision and turn it into reality and to lead others to something great. And I'm so inspired by you, and I hope that others are inspired by your story as well.
Thanks so much. I mean, you never know when you take that step where it's going to lead you. So hopefully it can inspire people that, from a phone call to laws being changed. Like, I never imagined it, but I knew I had to do something. And so hopefully that inspires other people in whatever work they're doing to know that just take that first step. It might be scary, but it definitely can be worthwhile.
Olivia Klaus is the director and producer of the film Sin by Silence. Olivia, thanks for being here.
Thanks so much.
As I'm sure you can tell from listening to this interview, this really is a labor of love for Olivia. And we talked a little bit after our conversation, and you may have picked this up during the interview, but the laws changing in California are really just the first step in this process for a lot of the women who are behind bars. Now they have the opportunity to go back to the courts and to revisit some of their cases, but of course that is not automatic. They have to have legal representation. They have to have people who are willing to put together documentation for them. And so one way that you could potentially help in this effort or even get involved is if you are a lawyer or maybe know someone who is a lawyer and is looking to volunteer some time to do some pro bono work for some of these women. That is something that is a huge need right now because the laws have been changed, but they need that legal representation to move forward. So if that is something that you are interested in or you know someone who is, feel free to reach out to me, feedback@coachingforleaders.com. I will get you in touch with Olivia, or of course you heard the web address for Sin by Silence, sinbysilence.com. That's a great way to get in touch with her directly. And speaking of getting in touch, we'd love to hear your comments and feedback about this episode and this interview today. So if that's something you'd like to join in on the conversation, go to coachingforleaders.com/103. That will get you there. You can also always leave an audio message as well. And the best way to do that is coachingforleaders.com/speak. And I mentioned the email address just a moment ago. You can also call in 94938-LEARN. And of course, that email address again, feedback@coachingforleaders.com. Hey, a few announcements before I let you go. I did mention on last week's episode that I have changed the RSS feed for the show. If you're not sure what that means, the only thing you need to know is if you're on Windows Phone or BlackBerry, this is going to affect you. So this is how you subscribe to the show, is the RSS feed. New subscribers, if you've just subscribed to the show recently, you are good to go. But if you've previously been on Windows Phone, subscribed to the show for some time, at least 2 or 3 weeks, you'll want to unsubscribe from the show. I know it's hard to believe I'm saying that. Unsubscribe from the show on your Windows Phone or your Xbox or Windows device, and then resubscribe, and that will resync to the new feed Unfortunately, their system doesn't allow it to change automatically. Those of you who are listening on, an Apple device or iPhone or Android, you should be okay. If you're not sure, you can do the same thing too. So if you listen, you're on a different app, like if you use Downcast or Instacast like I do, just unsubscribe and resubscribe. That'll make sure to resync the feed. So if you have any concerns about not getting the show going forward, with the feeds changing, just unsubscribe, resubscribe from wherever you use it, an app or directory, and that will resync things. Now, I do want to say a special message to BlackBerry listeners. I mentioned last time we're not able to get in touch with BlackBerry. For whatever reason, they're just not answering their email addresses. We've tried tweeting them, everything. So BlackBerry, we have set up a new listing for the show in the BlackBerry podcast directory. So if you use that and you're a BlackBerry user, you're going to want to unsubscribe from the show and then resubscribe to the show that's called Coaching for Leaders. There's an old name in the Coaching Skills for Leaders. The show used to be called a long time ago. That's in the directory now. You want to subscribe to Coaching for Leaders and make sure to do that soon, because for BlackBerry listeners, the old feed is going to go away in a couple weeks. We do have to delete that one because unfortunately new subscribers will find both and they won't know which one to subscribe to. So we are going to delete the old one. So if you're a BlackBerry listener, make sure to unsubscribe and then find Coaching for Leaders in the directory. And if you do that, you'll be good to go. If you have any problems with that at all, send me an email, feedback@coachingforleaders.com. And finally, just a reminder that the LinkedIn Citrus Challenge is still on from episode 101. Hey, thanks to everyone for your messages on LinkedIn. I am swamped on email at the moment, so I apologize if I haven't gotten back to you already. I will in the coming days. I actually got a crazy busy week coming up, so if it takes me a little longer to respond this week than normal, please bear with me, and I will get back to you on email or on LinkedIn. But if you are interested in joining, connect with me on LinkedIn, and then send me a message on LinkedIn saying you're entering the contest. And if you want the details for that, go back and listen to episode 101. The easiest way to do that, coachingforleaders.com/101. Hey, thank you very much this week to Srinivasa Sivakumar, Mark Jansen, Bhaskar Nelapudi, Tom Frick, Jim Lynch, Bill Keys, Monir Azuzi, Sean Richardson, and Mike Weiss for subscribing to my weekly article. I do publish an article each week that gives you a booster shot between shows on how to lead better by giving you some advice on improving your communications, human relations, personal productivity. If you'd like to get that in your inbox, go to coachingforleaders.com/subscribe. And you also get access to my overview on 10 books that will make you a better leader. And by the way, you can find all the old articles on the Coaching for Leaders website. So that's at coachingforleaders.com. They're all up there. You can comment up there and join the conversation as well. Hey, I hope you enjoyed the segment today. I'd really love your feedback on this new series, Everyday People, Extraordinary Leaders. And hey, if you know someone out there who's a unsung leader that maybe I should profile, I'd love to hear about it too. Have a great week. Take care.